Yeah, now I want us to start our lesson today. And in the previous lesson, we looked at uh, health and safety. We started looking at various safety measures that you need to take while in your workplace so that you can be able to ensure that you, as the worker, you are safe together with your clients and any other person who is in that particular surrounding. So we went ahead and looked at various types of accidents that you expect or you anticipate to see or to find in your workplace. So as we said, is that every type of work has potential type of accidents that are likely to occur. But you realize that when you're dealing with cosmetology, you'll find that there are specific type of accidents that you expect or you anticipate, so that you can be able to prepare to, just in case of anything, to be able or to be in a position to ensure that those accidents don't occur. For instance, we talked about electric shocks. You find that in most places you will find that electric shocks are very common, especially in a cosmetology setup. And that is why it is always important that when you are in a salon or in your nail spa or anything, you must ensure that all power appliances are put off and no naked wires. Are we together? So that you can be able to ensure that you are safe. Number two, there's also a possibility of having burns due to heat appliances if they are left unattended. For instance, if you have a water heater, you put it on and maybe it's not in water, there is a possibility that it can cause what? It can cause fire. Then we went ahead and looked at other things like falls, where you have slippery floors or those loose cables can actually lead to falls. Then lastly, we talked about the improperly supported items within your salon or within your workplace. If, for instance, you put a ladder somewhere, or maybe some pieces of wood or some pieces of metals, if they are not well supported, they can easily fall down and they can easily cause damage or injuries. So therefore, it is always important that you ensure that your workplace is safe and your workplace is in a way it should be safe for even your customers who are coming to your facility. I think you covered that in your previous lesson, the one which I had shared there.
Yeah, that is what I was doing.
Yes, and then now we talked about the causes. I think the causes of the accidents. I think we did fires, about fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, where we said that for fire to occur, there must be three things. That is oxygen, there must be heat, and there must be fuel. So we talked about the four classes of fire. That is class A fire, class B, class C, and class D. And we said that in class A, it involves solid materials, where it involves things like wooden materials or textile. Then B, we said that it involves flammable liquids, such as petrol, diesel, or any other flammable substance that you would be having in your salon. And the next is about the class C fires, which involve gases. So when you have fire that is started by a gas, whether it is cooking gas or any other gas within the salon, it is actually classified under class C. Then we also have, lastly, we have class D, which involve live electric apparatus. Live electric apparatus, that it includes if you have a faulty equipment that is using electricity and it can actually lead to fire, then that type of fire is what we refer to as electric fire, that is class D. Then we went ahead and looked at the different types of fire extinguishers, where we talked about the dry powder, we talked about sand, we talked about foam and blanket and all that. So all those, we looked at them. Then today I want us to look at first aid. So when I shared this slide, I think you were able to see what first aid means. So first aid is that immediate assistance you give a casualty or a person of sudden illness or injury before that person is taken to the hospital or before that person is given medical assistance. So which means when you are defining first aid, there are three elements that I will be looking for. One, it should be an immediate assistance given to a person. For instance, if you are in a salon and somebody just falls down, at that particular place you don't have a doctor. So which means you as a lay person, or you as a person who is there, yeah, at the area, we call it the first responder, you must be able to do something so that you can be able to save the life of that person. So in case of anything happening, that immediate assistance you give that person is what we refer to as what? First aid. Then you also need to show us about the sudden nature of the illness or the injury. So that means it's an immediate assistance given to a person or a casualty of sudden illness or injury, and this is done before the person is given professional medical assistance. So which means those three elements have to be there. Whatever the grammar that you use, those three elements have to be there in a definition of first aid. Now, what are some of the aims of doing first aid? So there are many aims or many reasons as to why we do first aid, but I want to cover a few. The first one is to save life. As we said, when somebody, for example, just suddenly becomes ill or suddenly becomes injured in your place of work, then that person is likely to lose their life while you are there. So in that case, what you do, whatever that you do to save that life is what we refer to as first aid. So the first aim of first aid, actually this is the biggest of all. So meaning that saving life is the major aim of first aid. Number two, first aid is done so that we can be able to relieve pain. So for instance, if somebody is in pain and you have a way or something that you can do to relieve the pain, that is what we can do. So in that case, you are doing first aid. Number three, first aid is very important in promoting quick recovery. It promotes quick recovery. And next is that it prevents further injuries and infection. So in other words, what we mean here is that first aid prevents further injuries. And if, for instance, somebody has had a fracture, if somebody has a fracture, in that case, if you don't do first aid for this person, there are high chances that the fracture will worsen or that particular injury will worsen. So that is why it's always important that once you have identified the nature of the injury, you can proceed to do first aid so that you can provide or you can reduce or prevent further injuries. Next is controlling the bleeding. You'll come to realize that even in a salon, more than 80% of the injuries that you'll get there will be related to bleeding. And therefore, in this case here, whenever there is bleeding, it is important to ensure that you, as a professional cosmetologist, you have some first aid skills that you can be able to do so that you can be able to control the bleeding. And lastly, we do first aid so that we make it possible for you to transport your casualty to the hospital without a challenge. So if, for instance, somebody has had a challenge in terms of maybe you have a fracture, or you have maybe a strain or a sprain, so in that case you need to know how to transport that casualty to the hospital. So it's always important that you can be able to do that. Next is on the principles of first aid. We have 4 principles of first aid, and all of them have C, so we call it a 4C principles of first aid. So the first one is to call for help. So whenever there is an emergency, we advise that you must be able to call for help so that you can be able to assist that person together. So if you get somebody injured or somebody who has an emergency, always call for help so that you can be able to help together. Then calmly take charge so that you can be able to help that casualty. Then check that particular area where the casualty could be lying or could be standing or maybe could be sitting. So you check that scene and carefully you start applying first aid. So those are the the 4C principle of first aid. Now, why do we learn first aid? We learn first aid among many other major benefits of first aid. Number 1, to provide quick medical treatment until a professional assistant arrives. Number 2, first aid helps in ensuring that the right methods of administration of medical assistance are given. If we don't train first aid, for example, in every profession, you'll come to realize that we may not be in a position to help if in case an emergency occurs. And if we want to help, we may not help in the correct way. So we train first aid, or we learn first aid for you to get equipped with the skills so that you can be able to utilize the skills in helping save life. Number 3, knowledge in first aid also benefits individuals themselves, meaning that even if, for instance, you yourself as a person, you have been affected or you have had that emergency, you can be able to help yourself because you already understand the role of first aid or how you do first aid for various emergencies that are likely to take place in your place of work. And lastly, it affords people with the ability to provide help during various emergency situations. So whenever we have various emergency situations, in that particular case, you can be able to do what? You can be able to provide first aid skills. So first aid skills are very important because of those 4 reasons. Providing medical treatment until a professionally trained medic arrives. Number 2, ensuring that the right methods of administration of first aid are used. Number 3, first aid benefits even you as a learner. And lastly, the ability to provide help during emergencies. So those are the 4 reasons or as to why we learn first aid. Now, there are what we call golden rules of first aid. Golden rules of first aid. So, just like another practice, it's always important to know or to memorize or to remember these rules. Rule number 1 of first aid, you do first things very fast, quickly, and quiet without causing panic. So, as a person, it's always important to ensure that you don't cause what? Panic. Magio, you can be able to hear that? Eunice, na kuona, are you able to hear? Are you able to hear that?
No, that's not problem.
Which problem?
The battery was low.
Eh?
The battery was low. But now it is okay.
Oh, okay.
Nilitoka kidogo.
Oh, sawa. Now, point number 2, give artificial respiration if breathing has stopped. If breathing stops, give